Hello, and welcome to the Ended Up in Vegas podcast. I'm Nikki.
I'm Megan.
Today we're talking about money. With us is Bree Soscia. She is a certified financial planner and a yogi. Bree, tell us how those two things go together.
Yes, so Financial Yogi is my DBA and my brand. I was part of a women's group a few years ago, and we always started every meeting with, tell us something personal and tell us something professional, that happened to you in the last week or so. And on the personal side, I would always talk about yoga. And of course, on the professional side, I'd always talk about money. And so they just started calling me the Financial Yogi, and it stuck. And now that's how I go by in my business. I've been a certified financial planner going on 12 years now. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm with LPL Financial and the Wealth Consulting Group here in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And I have lived in Vegas for about 20 years now.
Wow.
This is my 20th year.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Southern California.
Okay.
And lived there my whole life until I went away to college. I went to CU Boulder.
Okay.
College. Yep. And then after college, I moved actually back to LA, and I was an elementary school teacher in my former life. And I taught 4 years in downtown LA before moving back to Vegas.
Oh my gosh.
Cool.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah. Or moving to Vegas for the first time.
Yeah. What made you end up in Vegas?
Okay, so my parents got divorced when I was in college, and both of my parents actually moved to Nevada to escape the California state taxes. So my mom moved up near Tahoe, and my dad moved to Vegas, and so did my older sister and my brother. And every time I would come to visit them, they would drive me around town and be like, look what you could buy here for your first home. Mm-hmm. And literally your mortgage would be less than your rent that you're paying in LA. Mm-hmm. And eventually they got me. And I bought my first home here.
Cool.
20 years ago, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you were single at the time?
So I was living with my husband, and we were newly married, had a baby. So yeah, I've raised my daughters here as well.
How many kids do you have?
I have 2 girls. Mm-hmm. I have a 16-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I have a 16-year-old too. Is she driving?
Not yet, but this summer, it's on the list.
Yeah, it's a fun insurance time.
Yes.
So tell us how you blend, in the work that you do, tell us how you blend teaching about yoga and teaching about financial planning. And I think, I don't know this, are you yoga certified to teach?
I'm not actually.
Okay.
So I have never taught yoga. I've never taught a class in my life. People ask me that all the time. No, it's just really my passion. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you a little bit about my yoga background first. So I've been practicing yoga probably since about 10 years now. And I started at Las Vegas Athletic Club. And I met my teacher there, and I would just take vinyasa classes. And I loved the feeling that I got from yoga so much that I was like, I went up to her one day and I was like, how do I get more of this? Like, I just want more yoga in my life. And she actually sent me to Blue Sky Yoga, which is downtown in the Arts District.
Okay.
And that's how I started my journey with Ashtanga yoga. So that's actually the only yoga that I practice. So people are like, oh, what studios do you go to? And I don't practice different types of yoga. So Ashtanga yoga, or Mysore, it's named after a city in India, which I actually was fortunate enough to visit in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Oh, cool.
It's a certain style of yoga where you actually memorize a set sequence of poses. And once you can do one posture, then your teacher will grant you the next posture in the series. And you go at your own pace. You hold each posture for 5 breaths. And so when you walk into a Mysore or an Ashtanga studio, you'll see everybody doing something different. And the teachers just walk around and adjust you.
Right.
But of course, postures are only one small part of Ashtanga. Ashtanga means 8 limbs. And so it really does tie into finance so much. Just like with everything else in life, yoga and finance. I always say, there's no get rich quick scheme. There's no get healthy quick scheme. So many of the core values are tied together, like discipline, consistency, mindfulness, hard work. persistence, perseverance. I just could go on and on.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
yeah, like one of my main, I always say, like when I give talks about finance, that I really do believe that being financially healthy is such a crucial component to your overall health and wellness. Because if you're not healthy financially, then, so many other areas of your life are affected.
Yeah. And you were showing a video the other day where I think you parallel a lot of the disciplines that you practice in yoga to what you practice in real life. So tell us about some of the fundamentals of yoga, how those are compared with some of the fundamentals that you teach in your financial planning services.
I posted a reel maybe last week or two that, people will always say like, oh my gosh, you're so flexible. I could never do that. Or you're so bendy. And I'm like, no, I'm actually not at all. Like I am not a person who just walked into a yoga studio and like my back does not bend. I'm naturally strong. But the things that I'm able to do have come from years and years of going. I mean, I don't do this as much anymore because now I also weight lift, which I love, but I would go 5 to 6 days a week, and my practice is about 2 hours long. I start at 5:30 in the morning. So, and so much of that is the same with finance. It's you build wealth slowly over time.
Exactly.
And you have to do things, in a consistent, disciplined manner. Of course, having teachers, or professionals on your side to guide you. That's another philosophy that I definitely believe in.
Yeah. And I think something, that you get out of classes in a class setting is when your teacher adjusts you. It's those minor adjustments that make such a big difference in teaching you exactly how to get into the right form in the posture. And so what do you see as, when someone comes to you as a new client, what is kind of the outline and guide of like first steps, making sure that they're, on the right track, just to start with very basic things?
So I always like to say, with my career, it's not just about numbers. It's really, financial planning and personal finance. It's about your hopes and your dreams and your goals and how you want to live life, your values. And so when I first meet someone, there's different ways that I can work with people. Like I can invest their assets. I can do a financial plan for them. I can do hourly consulting, but we don't talk about investments on the first meeting. It's more, what are you trying to achieve?
Right.
What are you struggling with? What keeps you up at night? What kind of legacy do you want to leave, if anything, for the next generation or to, charities that you believe in? So it's more about core values. And, we're taught that, we shouldn't, I know money has been taboo in our society, right, throughout history, but I love talking about money. Money is such a beautiful thing because it's just a tool that allows us to live our life the way we want to live it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where do you land on the spectrum of, very famous, like the Dave Ramseys of the world? Because we always talk about Dave Ramsey as an example. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't believe that shit Dave said.
So I always try to be like, politically correct and professional. Whenever people ask me about Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman or, he says certain things that I agree with. Like I love like his snowball debt payoff plan. But you have to take everything with a grain of salt. There's no one size fits all, or, something is not going to work for everyone.
Sure.
It's just not like that. Just like with yoga, like when my teachers adjust me, they know my body and what's going to work for me may not work for somebody else. If you want to pay off debt and you are going to be able to get started faster by paying off your smallest balance rather than your highest interest rate first, you should do that. I never am of the mindset where you have to subscribe to one person.
Right.
You can take
Exactly.
bits and pieces from everybody.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way. I don't have the same, there's some good stuff with Dave Ramsey that I like. The debt snowball is one, and the emergency fund and some of the things that he suggests. But then it's like when you get into like buying a car or buying a house, and like some of it's just not realistic for the average person. So
I mean, I have a mortgage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, and we were just discussing that we have the same car. And so you were saying, that your CPA had said to you, like, you should get an electric car. It's a great tax credit.
Yep.
And that's exactly why I did it.
Yep.
So, and Dave Ramsey would have had me taking the bus.
Yes.
But, he doesn't recognize that, like, I went from a car that didn't have CarPlay in it. And that was a huge benefit to me, because when I would get a text message or an email and I'm driving, which I put in 17,000 miles on my car last year. So, I mean, when I'm driving and I can actually hear a text message and respond to it, like, that's a personal assistant, Dave. Like, you didn't build that into the cost of my car payment.
And it's good for the planet.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about like some of the other principles that you teach as far as investment planning. And you mentioned leaving a legacy. Speak to that.
So, part of being a certified financial planner means that I don't just talk about investments. So investments are only one piece of the puzzle. So, we also talk about estate planning and tax planning and retirement planning. Leaving a legacy, you probably wouldn't be surprised, but it's very surprising how many of us don't have all of our affairs in order.
Right.
So I do work really closely with CPAs and estate planning attorneys, and that's one of my very first discussions with my clients. I'm really good about talking about money and also death. It does not scare me. And so, part of that is going to meetings with my clients to the estate planning attorney and, making sure that my clients have their will in place or their trust or, again, whatever their personal or family needs are. Charitable giving is also a big part of my practice as well.
Very nice.
So when you meet with a client and let's say, they're self-employed like we are, and they have a specific set of goals, but maybe they're not saving for, retirement, or maybe they're not contributing enough to a 401k. What are some examples of situations that you have been in to adjust those people and to, really make like the changes that they need to their plan that benefits them?
So first of all, I love working with small business owners. That's definitely a niche of mine, because as small business owners, we have so many opportunities available to us that a lot of self-employed people just don't know about. Like if you're a W-2 employee, you are either going to save for retirement in an IRA, or maybe you have a 401k available to you. But as a self-employed person, we have IRAs, Roth IRAs, SEP IRAs, solo 401ks, and we just have so many opportunities that the general public probably doesn't know about unless you go and you talk to a professional. So, when after talking about hopes and dreams and goals and values, the next step of the process is usually data gathering. So I find out, what you currently have, and we talk about your cash flow, and one of my sayings that I always use is pay yourself first. So of course, that helps us to be disciplined is, okay, obviously it's a bit different for people who are self-employed because you're not getting a steady paycheck. But when you do get a commission or, your income revenue, you can pay yourself first into your accounts that you should be saving for. Another big concept that I teach is buckets of money, right? So buckets for your, maybe shorter term goals, like a nice vacation, your medium term goals, like maybe your children's college education, and then long term goals like retirement, or maybe, a house down payment 10 years down the line. So different purchases in your life or different savings goals are going to be invested differently, and they're going to go in different types of investments.
Yeah. So when you meet with someone and they're like, okay, so these are the goals that I have, and this is what I would need to live off of in retirement. and I'm self-employed, right? So one of the things that I've become aware of, and I don't know if you have this, but I don't have a long-term disability insurance plan. So is that something that you're like, okay, maybe we need to think about that before we start saving?
It's so funny that you say that, because this morning I was getting ready and I woke up and I wasn't feeling great. Like, it's not like a flu, but I was like, what if I get sick as a self-employed person? I'm a single parent. Like, what? I was like, I need to, because as an employee, I always had short-term disability, long-term disability, life insurance. And I was just talking to somebody about this last week. But yeah, there's like, is that something that you would start with, or?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So yes, it's a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So unlike Dave Ramsey, I am not of the philosophy that you do one thing at a time. Of course, we have to prioritize what someone can afford and what's most important. But yes, I do offer disability insurance and life insurance, and that is definitely part of the financial plan, especially if you have somebody who's dependent on your income.
So do you help your clients set those up as well, those
I do.
policies?
Yes, I do.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the most commonly overlooked pieces of a financial plan is disability insurance.
Yeah.
Because everybody's heard of life insurance, right? And we all know that we're going to die. But we have a much, much greater chance of becoming disabled and not being able to work.
Yeah.
Well, and I think something that is also generational, right? So we were taught by a whole different generation of people than are like, on the forefront of what you actually should be doing right now. So when I was little, I had like a whole life insurance policy where you could cash it out. It had a value. My dad used it as like an investment. It was kind of just backup money really for him, but that was his philosophy. So when it comes to like a short term or what is it? I'm thinking a term life policy.
Yes. So I'm a big believer in term life insurance. Again, if you have people who are dependent on your income should something happen to you, or your significant other, or you want your children to be able to maintain the lifestyle that they're currently living should something happen to you. Plus, term life insurance is inexpensive, right? Compared to permanent insurance, which most people know as like whole life, right?
Yeah.
I get upset a lot because I see people being sold permanent insurance policies where they're not suitable for them. A lot of times they're sold as retirement plans because that's the only option that person can provide. They do have a place, like most investments, for certain people. But I think for the general public, term insurance is usually a good place to start.
And what's the right amount that you generally recommend for people depending on what their income is?
Yeah, good question. I get that one a lot. So, there's lots of general rules of thumb, like 10 times your income. But it goes back to, it's also a personal decision.
Sure.
Some people want to be able to have their house paid off.
Right.
So maybe they just get enough to cover their mortgage. Some people want to be able to pay their house off and send all 3 children to an Ivy League college. Okay. Some people want their spouse's income to be, covered for 1 year. And then it also comes down to what you can comfortably afford.
Yeah.
So it is really, there's lots of formulas that I can use, but it's also personal as well.
Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah.
What do you, I don't know if this is pivoting too much, but we talked a little bit about retirement plans, and obviously the last couple of years, mutual funds, retirement plans, they're not doing so well. Do you have any opinion one way or the other as far as how people should be investing, or is that going to be very specific to someone's situation?
It is definitely very specific to somebody's. So I invest based on 3 things. Your time horizon, so how long the money is going to stay invested, your goals, what you want to achieve with the money, and your risk tolerance. So, someone who is like, I don't care if the market goes down 20% this year because I know it's going to be back up next year, is going to be invested very differently than somebody who is very cautious and afraid of the market. So, and one thing that people get confused about is, IRAs, 401ks, those are just account types, and it just tells the IRS how to tax them.
Sure.
Yeah. Mutual funds, exchange traded funds, stocks, bonds, that's the investment inside the account. So, and that's going to determine how well or how not well the account performs. I am definitely more of the school of thought of buy and hold. So again, you invest based on your time horizon, risk tolerance, and goals, and you stay the course. Especially the longer you have, the younger you are, the farther away your goals are. You should not be buying. Well, you can buy low, but you should not be selling based on fears or what's going on in the world, because I'm here to tell you there's always going to be an election. We may always be on the brink of war. And over time, the stock market always recovers, and it climbs a mountain. So it goes up and down, but over the long term, it goes up over time.
Yeah. And I think money is so intimidating to people. Planning with their money and so many things, like all the acronyms of all, every single account. Yeah. It's very scary to people to talk about. And I think because ideas are put out there and prescribed by, whoever in the world, I think people do that, and then they don't have a next step as to what they're going to do if XYZ happens. So like the psychology that you're speaking about is really the lack of a plan, right? The lack of a long-term next step plan. And so what is like the approach to when you're getting someone to invest? One is, you're going to buy something and hold it, and you're going to maintain. But what are some of the other options? And maybe I'm thinking along the lines of, if you want to buy a house in however many years, you're going to set aside a certain amount of money. And then maybe what are some like the contortionist moves that you can do to actually leverage what you're saving, leverage, your investments as part of a holistic approach to your finances?
Yeah, and I have so many thoughts. First of all, it's funny because my bachelor's degree is in psychology, and my master's is in education. And I feel like those two degrees are so helpful. I was just telling my neighbor this morning, like, I think 60% of my job is behavioral coaching.
For sure.
And there's so much mindset work that has to be done around money. And I get so many people who come to see me for the first time who are so terrified, or they say like, do I have to pretend I'm smart, or I don't know anything? And what I usually find is I'm never shocked because I've been in the business so long that I've seen a lot. I am rarely shocked. I see a lot of shame. I see a lot of fear. And when times get tough, when the market goes down, 2022 was a very hard year for many people. And I spend a lot of the time, begging people not to abandon their financial plan just because of what's going on.
Sure.
But, things that help with that obviously are like having diversified assets. Like,
exactly.
Even within the stock market, you have, your different types of investments, large caps, mid caps, small caps, stocks, bonds, and then I'm a big believer in, diversifying even, to real estate, which, you're well aware of. So people will usually feel comfortable with like real estate or the stock market. But I'm a believer in, like you said, leveraging both of those types of assets.
Yeah. Because we've done episodes on how people are buying homes, what they're, how they're making their down payment, how men and women are doing that, differently. But one of the ways that people don't often know that they can come up with a down payment is through a 401k, through taking money out. What do you see people doing often with that, or what are the rules that people should know about that?
Yeah, good question. So usually, if somebody comes to me and says like, I want to take money out of my IRA or my 401k, I'm going to say that's a bad idea.
Okay.
But that's one of the few instances where I'm like, okay, it's not a terrible idea.
Sure.
There are not so great things about it, because if you're taking, people are like, oh, I'm just borrowing money from myself. Well, you are charging yourself interest. You are losing time in the market. But if you're taking money out of one asset that is going to appreciate over time to purchase another asset that's going to appreciate over time, it's much better than taking money out of, your 401k to go on a cruise.
Right. Sure.
Ideally, in an ideal world, you're saving for your retirement separately than for your down payment on a home.
Yeah.
But it is an option.
One thing that I've seen that one of my smartest clients have done is while they're selling their previous house, they leverage the money from their 401k before the house sells because they don't have that down payment money to then put down on the new home that they're buying, but they're going to get that back and then be able to recompensate themselves afterwards.
Which, is fine if you're willing to take that risk, that nothing's going to go wrong.
Sure.
Because, even if it's out of an IRA, like you can take money out of an IRA as long as you're going to pay it back in 60 days. But what if the house doesn't close in 60 days and you don't have the money to put back? Then you're going to get taxed and penalized. So I always say there's no magic answer. Right. And if a financial advisor comes to you and says like, this is it, you should run because there are pros and cons to every investment. There are pros and cons to every account type. There's not one magic answer. I always compare it to like dieting or going to the gym.
So true.
There's pros and cons.
I love that because we hear a lot of, I think on social media, on YouTube, there's so many like blanket, like this is the right way and this is how you should do it. And it's like, even in real estate, like, is it a great time to buy or is it not a great time to buy? It depends. Your situation's going to dictate so much more than any one general rule or any one rule of thumb.
Yeah, it's so true. And you probably are like this when you see, people giving real estate advice on Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
Like I cringe, you know, because, there's so many influencers out there who are not licensed and they're not certified and they're giving financial advice. And it is scary. And because that's who we listen to. Right. And, I'm not one of those people who's like, don't watch the news or, the media is bad. Like, I'm not like that. But I always say to my clients, it's another one. I have all these like sayings is like, we don't listen to our next door neighbor. We don't listen to our colleagues. Like we don't listen to the news about how you should invest and plan for your future.
Right.
You can do it yourself and or have the guidance of a professional, but not, your next door neighbor. Because what's right for them is not going to be right for you. Or I have a lot of kids who are like, oh, I want this because my parents have it. I was like, okay, but your parents are in their 70s and you're in your 30s.
Yeah.
And so that's not good for you.
Yeah, I think with financial planning and some of those things, there's not a lot of instant gratification. And so that's one of the hardest things is like you really do have to be methodical and it does build over time. But we want that, we want that
It's
quick
so
fix
true.
or that quick.
Yeah. And I think that's a thing that happens when we're young too, is we hear about some, crazy return on an investment and then it turns out to be a Ponzi scheme or something like that, or, the stock dumps or whatever it is. So we learn those hard lessons as young people. And then I think that it makes it even more intimidating when we really approach it in like a rational way to be like, okay, I need to take care of this. Obviously, I can't just turn a blind eye to it. But I love what you said about, everyone is different. I think, when I was making a decision with my money, my financial planner said, I don't recommend what you're going to do. But if it's going to help you sleep at night, then go ahead and do it. Yeah. And I think that that's where like the biggest part of psychology comes in. Is, it has to be right for you. It has to be right for your like comfort level. Yeah. And if you're 100%. A more conservative person, or if you're a bull who's just like, I want the money. I don't care what happens. I might die tomorrow. Then it's so different for everyone, just like yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say that all the time. I'm like, look, you're the pilot. I'm just the co-pilot. I don't think that's a good idea. But you can call me tomorrow and without judgment, I will do whatever you say because you are in control. Yeah. I'm just here to offer my support and advice and guidance. So that's one thing I didn't actually get to say is how I got into the business and part of leaving a legacy. I don't know what just reminded me of this, but I think maybe talking about like how it builds over time and, it is like a long-term game. Is that my father was a financial advisor. So I'm 45. I literally started investing when I was 21 years old because I was fortunate enough to have, somebody in the business already to teach me.
Sure.
And so, I'm fortunate enough to have had like many years of watching market cycles and what happens to your investments over time, even before I was a licensed advisor. So.
Very nice. Yeah. I think, what do you think is one of the things that holds people up the most from, either hiring a financial planner or taking that step?
Yeah, good question. I think like you said, sometimes we just get in our own way with like instant gratification and we just keep going on doing what we're used to doing and just like, those things are so far down the line that it doesn't matter now, even though it does. Just like what we put in our bodies or how we treat our bodies now is going to make such a difference like 30, 40 years from now. Same with our money. So I think some of it's just like, being stuck in a rut. I think I do, like I said, see a lot of like shame, fear. People will literally like start shaking when they come in and talking to me because they're so embarrassed or, so.
I can understand that.
Yeah, and I think the unknown too, because when you think of a financial advisor, you think of like a stuffy guy in a suit using words that you're not going to understand, So I always get people in there like, I'm really nervous, like I don't know anything. And I'm like, you're fine.
Yeah.
And who cares if you don't know anything? Like, that's what you're going to pay me to do. Like, teach you.
That's why you're here.
So I think just like breaking down the barriers of like finances are not scary. It's just something that, the general public isn't that well versed in.
Do you do hot yoga? Is your yoga hot? Okay. So I feel like, especially in a hot class, I loved how Glennon Doyle described this in her book. I can't remember if it was in Untamed or her other book, but she talked about going to a yoga class. I think it was her other book. And all she could do was just lay there on her mat because it was
party
just
time, right? Don't they call it party time?
Yeah.
In Bikram yoga.
Yeah.
When you get to lay down.
Well, no, but she like didn't do anything the whole class. Like she was just so, like consumed by the heat.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very similar in making the parallel of you're just so intimidated, like you lose words, you start to shake, you're like, I don't even know how to do this. Like I'm not smart enough or, and people lack so much confidence because they're not versed in the education portion of it or something that they were taught, 10 years ago or 20 years ago by a parent or grandparent. Like my dad was buying, bonds for me when I was little. I'm like, where did all those go? Right. Like, do you just like cash them out? Like what happened, like, are those a thing anymore? But there are different things in that vein that are similar. But I guess the point that I'm getting at is you just get there, right? Like the first thing is just to roll out your mat and to show up.
Yes.
And if all you can do is just meet with you. So like, how do you coach somebody through? Do you have a phone consultation or do you have somebody come in or is it their preference?
Yeah, so I usually try to have I have an appointment link, but I usually try to have somebody sign up just for a quick phone call first, just to make sure that it's not a waste of their time, see if it's a good fit, see if I really can help them at all. And then, moving forward, I do like to have in-person appointments, at least for the first few meetings, because money is personal.
Sure.
I'm licensed in, I think, like 15 different states. So I have clients all over the country. So obviously Zoom but the hardest part is just getting started.
Yeah.
So once you get everything in order, it really, is on autopilot and then phone calls are fine. So.
And I think another part of that is people are like, well, I'll learn it myself. There's enough swirling out there.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay I don't want someone to take my money.
Right. Or there's an idea that maybe it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest obstacles I'd say in our business is, people being really aware of fees. And I like to be super open and transparent about fees because financial advisors have a bad reputation because of Ponzi schemes and like, oh, they're just taking my money to manage it. Like I can, do it just as well. And I'm not against being a do-it-yourselfer. But I say, if you want to do it yourself, just pay somebody who is licensed for a few consultation meetings, maybe 1 or 2 a year.
Okay.
Because you can't know everything.
Exactly.
And no matter how much you research on the internet, people who have years and years of experience are just going to know things
Mm-hmm.
about your situation that they can help you with.
Yeah.
So I get not wanting to pay somebody like an investment management fee, but I can't find a good argument for why you wouldn't want to pay somebody a consultation fee.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? It's like going to the doctor.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to do your own heart surgery or change your own oil. I mean, some people do still change their own oil, but like, the time it would take you to learn how to do all those things, what is your time worth?
Right.
Specialize in what you're good at,
Yeah.
and then go to the experts for the people that, the
Yeah.
advice you need.
Yeah. And, making a mistake can cause you or cost you dollars, whereas, trying to save a few pennies, like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Because it's a big deal
Yeah.
when
Right.
you're dealing with money, and you can make a mistake that affects the rest of your life.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think we run into a lot of situations in real estate with, capital gains tax and other things like that people need to be aware of before they sell a home. Like, those aren't necessarily questions I think that every realtor asks when they sit down with someone like, oh, I see you bought your house less than 2 years ago. You're going to pay capital gains when you go to sell it, right? So, what are some of the things that you're teaching your kids now? Like I've got a teenager who's working, and I think that that's like one of the biggest things is everything that I was taught when I was a kid really is obsolete now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I have a different opinion on this than a lot of people, because my parents, they paid for my college. And I hear a lot of people like, I want my kids to pay for their own college because I want them to learn the value of a dollar. I think there's so many different ways that you can be successful as a parent teaching your kids about money. Like, I had my college paid for by my parents, but I still really valued my education. Sure. And, they said you're going to college and then you're not coming home. So you're going to find a job when you have a degree. And that's exactly what I did. And, I'm in the same boat as you. Like, my daughter is getting her first job this summer. She babysits but do I still transfer money into her account? Like when she's going to the movies today? Yes. But yeah, there's so many good ways to teach your kids these days that we didn't have when we were young. Like my younger daughter, she's 8 and she loves to go to Target and Walmart, and she has that little debit card from Greenlight and she loves it. So, and she brings her little change purse and hands the person quarters. So I think there's not, again, one right way to teach your kids. If you want to pay for their college, if you don't want them to get a job during high school, they can be successful in many different ways, depending on how you handle it.
Yeah.
I had a neighbor who, whose daughter's a doctor, and he gave her, he didn't pay for her college, but he, from the time she was young, he gave her, if you get an A, you get this much, and I think when she graduated, when she became valedictorian, she got a car. And she ended up getting so many scholarships that they didn't have to pay for college. Right. But he was like, I gave her $100 for an A. And so there's so many different schools of thought. And I thought that was really cool. Yeah. One of the questions I have is, something that, I've thought about and I think we've talked about is not everybody's going to college, and the cost of college has gone up so much since I went to college in, 20 years ago. I think even for me, there's hesitancy to put money into a college fund because what if my kids don't use it? And I know they're like, oh, well, your grandkids can use it. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm not thinking that far ahead.
Right.
What do you have, I know it's probably dependent on the situation, but do you have advice for parents who are trying to make a decision on whether they should do a college fund or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right. It has become less common. So there's basically 2 types of accounts that you can open for a minor. That's a 529 account, which is for college, or a UTMA or a UGMA, depending on what state you're in, which is an account where you're the custodian until they become 18. And there's pros and cons to both, right? Because if they don't go to college, you're going to use that money for something else, but you're going to pay taxes and penalties on your earnings. The not so great thing about the UTMA, the other account, is that when they turn 18 by law, it becomes theirs. So some parents, I even have parents opening joint accounts in their name so that, the money always remains theirs, but they just know that that account is separate and it's for the child, but yes, I see that very commonly right now where people are like, no, we don't really care about college. Like, we just want to open an UTMA because we want our child to be able to use the money for whatever they want.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I still think college has a lot of value, and I would love it if my kids would go. But it's hard to say that in another 10 years, you know, it really just, the cost of college is just insane. So
It is.
Yeah, and if they have the opportunity to do a skilled trade and they want to go to trade school for that money doesn't apply there. So
or they're going to be an entrepreneur or self-employed. Like, you know, sometimes those things are maybe like, I can see the benefit. I'm a big believer in college. I learned a lot from my college experience. So, but you know, it's out of my control as to whether or not they're going to do that.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want my daughter to go to college, but mostly just for the college experience and
for
growing
sure.
up and becoming independent. And I agree, like the research shows that you probably have more opportunity if you have a degree. But yeah, my husband, he has a son in college right now. And I remember him saying like, Dad, are you going to pay for my college? Because if you're not, I'm not going, because I don't want to take out student loans.
Yeah.
You know, and I have clients now who are, you know, doctors and lawyers with like 6 figures of student loan debt. And, you know, it's a really tough way to start your adult life.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I did was set up high yield savings accounts for my kids. And then I told all my family, I'm like, is your checking account getting you like 4%, 5% right now? Like, and so my daughter's checks go into an account that makes like 5% interest a month. And then, you know, we've talked about how to like apportion the money where 20%, you know, there was a time she wasn't working and using my credit card as freely as she needed to. And she knows that she owes an amount back, but she's like, I don't want to know how much it is. And sometimes we like to do that, right? We like to put blinders on. I don't want to know how much I spent last month, right?
Yeah.
But she knows, okay, she has to pay me back 20%. She's going to put 20% in savings. And then the other 60% is, you know, for concerts and clothes and things like that.
Fun. Yeah, I've seen the jar method too, where it's like save, spend, donate.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess the other question I have is, are you seeing a lot of people who, and I guess if someone has a lot of equity and they have a retirement and they're trying to decide what's the best course of buying another house, do you have any thoughts on, are you seeing a lot of that right now? Because I mean, I think we're in a different kind of real estate market than we were 10 years ago. People have equity, they have low interest rates, but I know a lot of people who would like to buy another house, but their money is tied up in the house that they live in.
So do you mean like stay living there, take the equity out, like through a loan?
Yeah, or either
and use that towards retirement?
Or to cash flow it and just use the cash flow from renting it out.
like if they want to rent that house out, buy another house, and they're trying to decide between maybe using a 401k loan or taking their equity out. Like, do you find people are making those kinds of decisions right now?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but it will be interesting to see, because I just keep hearing in the headlines like how people aren't moving because they're not willing to give up their current interest rate, which makes sense, right? But we have to be really careful of that kind of thing in our industry. Like, we can't use money that comes from like a home equity line of credit or a reverse mortgage or anything like that to invest.
Okay.
Because it's not considered your money.
Oh, okay.
Right? It's considered the bank's money that you're borrowing.
Sure.
So tell us about where you live in Vegas and where you and your family have found belonging here.
We live in Henderson, and I'm totally team Hendo. I love Henderson. I lived like the first 10 years in Vegas in the Northwest behind Lone Mountain, which I also love, but I just love the small town feel of Henderson. So being from California, I always tell people like, I love Las Vegas so much. It's just a small town and everybody knows everybody. And they're like, Vegas is a small town. And I'm like, when you are from California, yes, it is.
Yes.
So we live right by the Trader Joe's on Eastern. And yeah, I love Henderson.
So last night, do you eat sushi?
I do.
So I went to I Love Sushi.
Okay.
And I ran into two friends named Danielle. Both of my Danielles were at I Love Sushi, so in Henderson. Tell us about where your favorite places to eat are and like where you guys are going on Sunday when you have family time or whatever day it is when just the weather is perfect.
Okay. So I'm vegan.
Okay.
So I like to research all the vegan restaurants in town, and we have so many good ones. So my husband and I, our favorite is Sinatra at the Wynn.
Okay.
So it's not a vegan restaurant, but they have a vegan menu.
Okay.
And my client is the general manager, and she always takes really good care of us.
Yeah.
So that's our favorite restaurant. It's fancy, but we go there for special occasions. Gray's Kitchen. Have you heard of Gray's?
No.
Oh, it's so yummy. That is all vegan. It's like buffalo and 215.
Okay. That's right by me.
So good. So good. So vegan restaurants for sure. Vegan sushi. We have an all vegan sushi restaurant here called Daikon.
What does vegan sushi have in it?
Avocado,
Cucumber.
watermelon that looks like salmon.
Okay.
Yeah. So vegan sushi. Where would you find us on a Sunday? Walking my dogs. Black Mountain. I like to go hiking there.
Yeah.
Right here in Henderson. The farmers market off of St. Rose. Trader Joe's. We're always at Trader Joe's.
I think one thing that people don't know about Vegas is that we have hundreds of trails for hiking and walking. And Black Mountain specifically has, like, you can go to one spot and take, 5 or 6 different routes and end up at different difficulty levels.
And you can start from kind of your side, or you can start from the Inspirata side.
Yeah,
like
the west
everything
side, east side.
Connects all over. Like I just think it's there's so many trails here. There's so much hiking.
Yeah.
I love Vegas. I actually hope that I live here forever.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great place. I think that's one of my favorite things about doing this is kind of disbanding the idea that Vegas is, or what people think Vegas is, because it's not that.
Yeah, I'm like, we never go to the Strip. Although we have been doing a really good job of that since the pandemic. We have been trying to like take more advantage of our city and going to like a lot of comedy shows because we have the best restaurants, the best shows, the best entertainment. We're so lucky.
Yeah. Did you guys go on the Strip I never went on the Strip during the pandemic. Did you guys go? Yeah.
Actually, my friend and I tried to go rent bikes, and we ended up spending like a whole evening just going from bike spot downtown because they had those like, the ones that you could check out. Yeah. And we just kept going to different spots trying to find a bike. But yeah, we went down a couple times. It was crazy.
Did you go?
I didn't, but I remember seeing those pictures where there were like ducks crossing the road.
Yeah.
I was just empty.
It was so bizarre.
I guess I wasn't intrigued to do it enough because I've run the Vegas Marathon. And so when you've like been on the Strip and you're like, oh, that pothole is like 4 yards wide. Like I didn't know that, but I did after running it.
It was an experience because I've been on the Strip for New Year's Eve. What's the one? The Race for the Cure. I've done a bunch of different ones, but like there was no people anywhere.
Well, and all the lights turned off was probably a totally different.
There were lights. All the lights were on. I don't know.
Oh, they were at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like how the billboards had like special messages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
But let's hope that never happens again.
Yes. No.
In your position, how worried were you at that point?
Well, the market was really weird because it like crashed, but then it started coming back like
quickly.
right away. So yeah, I remember doing like a lot of damage control, but it was super chaotic because it was like everything just plunged and then everything just came back.
Yeah.
So fast. I think actually last year was harder because the market went down and just like it's been lasting and lasting and lasting, and people are like, when are things going to turn around? Whereas during the pandemic, it went down really fast, but it came back really fast.
I remember at the very beginning parts of the pandemic when we were just kind of in the stay at home, and I called my my retirement account planner. I was like, should I move money into something a little more secure because things are going down? And he's like, no, you should leave it. And then it shot up, and I was like, okay, I'm really happy I did that. And then it went back down. I'm like, what the heck? And now it's just like languishing in this like purgatory state of like, I'm never retiring.
I know. I heard somebody say like last week, if you're in real estate in 25 years, you're doing something wrong. And I was like, oh no, I really do have a limited time left here. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure.
Yes,
How can people get a hold of you to utilize your services?
Good question. So I guess the easiest way is my website, which is financialyogi.com.
Okay.
And Instagram, I'm Financial Yogi too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we're following along, so we'll learn
Thank you.
from the best.
And you just earned a client.
Yes. There you go.
Thank you.